wanting Santa Claus to be real, but Santa Claus isn't real. NATO can't fight a war. NATO won't fight a war. NATO's in no position to fight a war. And gave the Poles advance notice, and the Poles responded. Of the 19 decoy drones, deploys 40,000 additional troops to the border. Please, people, don't panic. It's 40. It's a total, I think it was 30,000, total of 40,000 troops there now. Career-ending losses. And so they, in order to save the company, they had to transition to armor to take, unless you, as Gerald said, create a war urgency. And so this is what's happening right now is you've just got a war. And this is for all of Europe. The Ukrainians apparently over time accumulated a number of Russian decoy drones. And struck a village doing damage. And now everybody admits this is just a total frame up. It's just there's no one who takes this seriously anymore. Isn't all this stuff? I mean, look, England sent 2 Eurofighters. This is a joke. It's nothing.
Well, first of all, let's just stop the nonsense about a Russian NATO war. It will never happen. NATO is incapable of fighting a war with Russia. Again, it's like wanting Santa Claus to be real, but Santa Claus isn't real. NATO can't fight a war. NATO won't fight a war. NATO's in no position to fight a war. This was a provocation by Ukraine done, I believe, in full cooperation with at least parts of the Polish government. The Ukrainians apparently over time accumulated a number of Russian decoy drones. These are, styrofoam drones that are designed to, activate radars to absorb fire, to give away positions, hopefully get the Ukrainians to waste air defense resources so that the real drones could do their job. And they launched these into Poland. Belis reported this and gave the Poles advance notice. And the Poles responded. Of the 19 decoy drones, only 4 were engaged. Apparently, only 3 were shot down. One, I think a Polish F-16 fired an AIM-120 air-to-air missile, not a service-to-air missile, air-to-air missile that missed and struck a village, doing damage. And now everybody admits this is just a total frame-up. It's just there's no one who takes this seriously anymore. But the Poles, because they were playing to a script, went to, Article 4 of the NATO Charter, got everybody's armor, and then per the script, you see this sentry, or whatever they call Eastern Sentry, taking place. Poland deploys 40,000 additional troops to the border. Please, people, don't panic. It's 40, that's a total, I think it was 30,000 total of 40,000 troops there. Now, these are Polish troops that have 14 days worth of ammunition. They ain't going to war with anybody. By the way, Russia did the Zapad 2025 exercise, 100,000 troops, and that there's 100,000 troops that aren't involved in the conflict with Ukraine, which is around, 800, 900,000 troops. So let's just stop the nonsense. The danger here isn't all this stuff. I mean, look, England sent 2 Eurofighters too. I think France sent 3 Rafales, 3. The Germans sent 2 fighters, 2. This is a joke. It's nothing. 0 squat. The problem comes in what happened next. The Ukrainians turn to the Poles and say, we want to train you how to shoot down drones. We want to train you how to fight the Russians. The Poles said, okay, so now Ukrainian air defense actors are going to Poland to begin training a NATO member on how to engage the Russians. But even here, I ask people to take a deep breath. Poland will not extend an air defense umbrella into Western Ukraine without the Russian permission. And now we have to go back to Natishkin's little conference that he had early this summer, where they said, yeah, we think when this war is over, we're probably looking at the partitioning of Poland, of Ukraine, and Western Ukraine will go to Poland, and Carpathia will go to Hungary, and other parts will go to Romania. This is what I think is happening here. I think the Poles right now are getting positioned for the collapse of Ukraine, which is happening as we speak. By the way, collapses don't happen overnight, but we're looking at the political collapse, the economic collapse. You hear the panic in Zelensky's voice every time he speaks. Now, the military collapse. I think what's, eventually going to have you need to have a controlled demolition of Ukraine.
And for that to happen, there will be a moment when Poland needs to extend an air defense umbrella into the territories that it's going to take responsibility for. The territories that will probably be flooded with with refugees. Will be a humanitarian crisis. And this will be done with the permission of Russia. But Poland's preparing to do that right now by learning how to integrate into the Ukrainian air defense system. That's what's happening. This isn't about NATO getting ready to go to war with Russia or anything. That just isn't going to happen. They don't have the capability to do it. This is about Poland and Ukraine. Because remember, you got to go back and look at the history. Zelensky has already worked with the Poles about setting up an economic union. They've already prepared Western Ukraine to be absorbed by Poland. Western Ukraine has already de facto been absorbed by Poland in terms of economic interaction. So all this is doing is setting up. This is my take, because I'm not going to get involved in any of this fear mongering about war between NATO and Russia, because it just isn't going to happen. NATO has zero capacity.
Ukraine can't be allowed just to fall apart on its own. And the Russians and the Poles, I believe, are in contact with another, maybe through Belarus, for the controlled demolition of Ukraine. We are now in an let's call it a historical period that when future historians, if we survived, this will look back and see this as a change, as consequential as what took place at the end of World War II with the formation of Bretton Woods, the United Nations International Monetary Fund, World Bank, the old, let's call it the colonial-based empire and economic system is coming to an end. And it's not going peacefully into that night. It's raging against the storm. But what has been exposed in the course of the special military operation by Russia is the complete lack of strategic depth in the West. Yeah. On paper, there is this military industrial complex. Yes, it sucks up a lot of money, but its output is pretty shoddy. Well, let's focus on what Gerald was talking about. Porsche isn't producing civilian cars right now because they can't. They too expensive. So, and Porsche, I think in 2024, suffered career-ending losses, and so in order to save the company, they had to transition to armor to make tanks. The problem for Porsche is that there is no German company that makes steel. They can't afford to because they got rid of that cheap Russian gas, and they just can't do it. So they have to buy all their steel from Sweden, and that's costing them a pretty penny. And the reality is, even though Porsche is now investing, a significant amount of money to transition to defense industry, they can't afford it. They're not going to build a single damn tank because they can't afford it. They're about ready to go under. Porsche's going to roll. They're trying to sell some of their business. They're breaking it up as we speak. They're selling some of their business to a Czech billionaire who thinks that he's got the plan, but there is no plan. Unless you, as Gerald said, create a war urgency. And so this is what's happening right now is you've just got a war, and this is for all of Europe. They literally can't afford to do what they claim to do. So in order to convince people to spend the money, which will just destroy their recession-driven economies, even worse, they have to gin up the fear of Russia. No one's buying it. The Polish people aren't buying it. The German people aren't buying it. The French people aren't buying it. Nobody in Europe's buying this, but the politicians. So they're singing a song to themselves. This is what's happening. Rutte is the Secretary General of NATO, a military alliance that can't sustain itself. Literally, I mean, look at the stupidity of NATO. You know, they weren't able to meet the 2.5% benchmark that had been set. That was that's GDP. So now they all said, we're going to do this is 5% GDP. It's not as though they're increasing defense spending by 2.5%. We're talking about 2.5% of the gross domestic product of the entire nation. No budget can support this. Not a single one can support this. They can't. They don't have the money. It's just stupidity. And so, in order to do this, the Germans are talking about doing away with pensions, cutting healthcare, cutting all the things that made Germany work. And Germany is a collapsing society. I was just in Switzerland talking to the Swiss, a nice little bastion of sea civilization, because they haven't totally sold out yet to the warmongers, although Swiss neutrality is at risk. But they're coming in from Germany. And I said, man, I remember Germany fondly said that Germany doesn't exist anymore. I mean, German trains don't run on time. They break down. I can attest to this. When I was in Berlin, I was on one of their high-speed trains, and I literally got kicked off and had disaster. But continue. Yeah. France is a joke. Literally a collapsing, massive stupidity. The British Starmer, was sitting there talking about, I've got until May of, no, you don't, Starmer. You're going down sooner than you think. All of Europe's going down. And so what do you do when you have this warmongering class that has been in power now for several decades? The European Union divided by NATO, slaves to America, suddenly being told, you're on your own. I mean, they're in pure panic mode. And so this is what we're seeing. We're just seeing panicked people making statement after statement after statement that is so far removed from reality. Because again, Gerald, they're not going to build a tank. They can't afford it. They don't have the money for it. I mean, they can sit here and talk about all they want. I mean, words can flow. Back in the Depression, at least we had a steel industry. Pittsburgh put steel out there. Ford can convert his Model T into Shermans. The Germans, they got nothing, right? Porsche is a collapsed entity. They're breaking up their steel industry as they speak. The Swedes can't, they're going to jack up the price of their armor-plated steel, and it's competition because the French now are talking about building tanks, but they don't make steel anymore. Nobody makes steel in Europe anymore except the Swedes. That's it. Nobody makes armor-plated steel. So now you're going to be competing for it. So now you're going to have everybody saying, we need some of this steel. The prices are going to go up, and the Germans have no money. They're bankrupt there. So this is why you're seeing the rhetoric you're seeing, but the reality is there are people in the background for, especially in Poland, because keep in mind that the Poles, they have Tusk, who is just a Russophobic, but they also have a new president who's rustic, but not quite a meaning. He understands certain realities. For instance, the new president is putting the government of Poland on task. Why the hell did one of our missiles hit a village? And why did you report it as a Russian thing for Polandschiss? Why are you lying to the Polish people? You got the president of Poland at war with the prime minister of Poland, and you have the president of Poland saying things like, yeah, we ain't extending our air defense into Ukraine. We're not doing any of this crap. We're not. Poland understands the realities. The Polish generals understand the realities of what's going on here. They know they got 14 days worth of ammunition at best. And I always love it because it's 14 days based upon ideal conditions. Larry, nothing in war is ideal. So imagine trying to take your ammunition out of a depot that just been blown up. Gosh, you don't have 14 days worth of ammunition anymore, do you? Because you just lost 80% of a massive explosion because you couldn't evacuate to the combat deployment points, which you haven't established yet. But let's say you started moving some of these combat deployment points. Now the drones overwhelm you and you pop them off. You lose 70% of your traffic going in there. You got 2 days worth of ammunition now, but you don't have any howitzers left because they're all killed too. The Poles know that it's game, set, match the moment they engage with the Russians. It won't even be a hesitation. This is why the Poles are involved in a completely different game right now. Nishkin, the head of the Russian Foreign Service, Foreign Intelligence Service, would not, this is just my assessment, maybe Larry and Gerald can correct me if they think I'm wrong, but he is not going to commit publicly to something like a partition of Ukraine on his own volition. Nishkin didn't wake up in the morning and go, "What the hell? Screw it, Putin. Up yours, buddy. I'm going to go ahead and unilaterally make the decision that when Ukraine collapses, we're giving Western Ukraine to the Poles." Now, he made this decision because there is already things. The Russians don't lead with their words first. The Russians build the foundation of reality, and then their words align with reality. So for Nishkin to say, we're giving Western Ukraine to the Poles, or we're considering, it means A, that decision's already been made, and B, there's somebody in Poland who's received this and acknowledged that that's probably the direction they're going. So I think what we're seeing right now is just sheer panic on the part of NATO, on RE, on this moronic, I'm sorry, that's my favorite war there, because I saw a movie called The Baltimore. So I'm using the term. I apologize to anybody out there that might be insulted by that. But the fact is, look at the German chancellor crying, literally crying about anti-Semitism. The guy's his grandfather was a Nazi who killed Jews, and now he's up there faking it. That's all he can do. Europe is one big menopausal female going through a hot flash. Emotions, hormones going. There's nothing serious about Europe today. Nothing serious at all. That's my take. Well, going back to the building up their military, and as I said, when all else fails, they take you to war. This is and by the way, one of the covers of our Trends magazine, Trends Journal, was Heil of Merz, for what he's doing. And again, $1 trillion as they're in recession. But here's the lie that they're selling, and even the mainstream media is selling it. They say that by building up their military, they're going to build up their economy. No, they're not. They're going to go deeper into debt. Your economy is built up when the products that are manufactured in your country are bought by consumers. Number two, this is a waste of money because it would, before it began talking about the drones. Let's go back. When did this drone stuff start happening? Well, that's relatively new in the last, decade and a half, maybe? The weapons that they're making, this is like making, catapults to fight a war, or trenches. This is tanks, planes. This is all a waste of money. World War II, or was this guy's name Einstein? They asked him, what kind of weapons will be used to fight in the Third World War? He said, I don't know, but they'll be using sticks and stones to fight the fourth. You got it. This is a total waste of money. You go to war against Russia, everybody, bye-bye world. It's going to be nuclear annihilation. And let's put something else back in there too. Look what's going on in Israel with that war, that the slaughter going on now. They're wiping the people out of Gaza. And how many more people are saying that Israel is going to ramp up an attack with Iran? It goes to war with Iran. This time, it's going to be a totally different deal. Iran is a very advanced nation militarily, scientifically, technologically. And what does Israel say they're going to do if they lose? Not my language, their language. The Samson option, so they go nuclear. So that's my greatest concern. This weapons that they're making now, this a waste of money, only enriching the military-industrial complex, and has nothing to do with winning a war. This is one of my books, Trends 2000. I was brought to international bestseller, brought to Virginia Military Institute back in 2000 to talk about what I called New Millennium Warfare. It's a totally different game, and that was 25 years ago, and how things have advanced since then. So again, I don't know how World War II will be fought, said Einstein, but World War will be fought with sticks and stones. War is a skill, and I'm a firearms instructor, and I know that if people go out and practice, they can improve on what they do. Well, what Russia's been doing in the course of the special military operation, it's going to an advanced graduate school. They've been learning all along the way. They didn't start off with one firm plan and then stick to that without any change or alteration. What they had perfected is described as net-centric warfare. And it's the kind of thing that a soldier out in a particular location that's getting attacked, whether by drone or artillery fire, can immediately call in fire on that particular target so that they're integrated fully throughout the various or echelons of the military. And they have perfected this kind of communication as well as innovation at the lower levels. In the past, the model was that the Soviets were very rigid and, they did things one way and they wouldn't listen to the soldiers on the front line. And that's been proven to be just wrong. I raise that because, in contrast, there doesn't appear to be any learning going on in the West, particularly among NATO. I mean, when we look back at the failed so-called counteroffensive that Ukraine launched in June of 2023, this was largely planned by U.S. generals, by U.S. military planners. You don't have to be von Clausewitz or Sun Tzu to figure out that if you're going to attack a bunch of entrenched positions and fortifications that are very much in depth, and you don't have any air power, your chances of winning are pretty slim, and the Ukrainians got wiped out. What I'm raising here, though, is Russia, by virtue of this war, and they call it the special military operation because they haven't mobilized society, but nonetheless, they are learning things about the productive capability, their ability to innovate, their ability to bring new technologies to the battlefield, that they're not burdened with some of the same bureaucratic and political obstacles that the West has shackled itself with. So they're much more nimble and capable. Again, I can't speak for them. If I were advising them, though, I would just say we need to be engaged, but we don't need to be decisively engaged because these people stand for nothing. We can develop individual relations. For instance, both Russia and China are working with Iran right now, but even that's complicated. It's not as simple as, it's not like Iran and Russia are like, hey, we're all on the same side here. There's complexities, and same thing with China. But what I would be telling the Russians and the Chinese if I were their advisors is there is no vacuum here for us to fill at this point in time, because we have a very weak Arab world, and we have an Israel that is undeterrable. And do we want to be in the business of establishing a deterrent against Israel with the United States on the other end? I think Russia and China need to behave very carefully, to take a step back and just continuously evaluate, look for opportunities that may develop. But, the idea that, there's a vacuum being created that's going to be filled by Russia or filled by China, I don't think that's correct. I don't think either Russia and or China are in a position to fill any vacuum. I mean, was China ready to deploy a, blue water navy into the Persian Gulf, into the Indo-Pacific? The answer is no. Russia doesn't have a blue water navy that of any note that could be deployed in that area. They don't have expeditionary wings. Russia, yes, they did send an expeditionary air component to Syria, but that's not something that could be replicated easily, especially with the Ukraine conflict going on right now. So I would just say that Russia and China are going to be in the let's wait and see mode. They'll keep their finger on the pulse, but they're not going to be jumping in on both feet anytime soon. This is the ultimate challenge of dealing with the United States in this day and age. And I think the day of sitting down with the United States and coming up with a mutually acceptable, mutually beneficial outcome, that's old school diplomacy. And I don't think the Trump administration's capable of engaging in that kind of diplomacy. I think instead these nations need to wait for the Trump administration. Instead of leading the horse to water, you just sort of got to wait back until the horse goes to water on its own. And I think that's what has to happen here with the United States, is that the traditional structures of diplomacy are out the window. And what needs to happen is both Russia and China and anybody dealing with the United States has to step back and just monitor what's happening. Try and influence on the periphery, but don't jump in with both feet with the United States, because it can be a very frustrating experience. What you have to do is let the United States sort of arrive at a decision point on its own. And then if that decision point's where you wanted them to begin to be, then you can jump in and sort of fix that in place. But it's almost impossible to have comprehensive negotiations with the United States right now, because we don't have, at this point in time, we are transitioning from the American, hegemony, the American, unity, unipolar world to a very complicated multipolar world.